What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Citizens Gaming Podcast. I'm Tim.
Hey, ladies and gents, this is Josh.
And this is Brendan.
So, I hope you guys enjoyed the Halloween special that we did. Like I said during the show, it was kind of a let's show this out there. Let's talk about scary games or games that include Halloween content, which coming with Halloween end of October, I can't believe it's November already. It feels like this year has just flown by.
Absolutely.
It is just
Which is scary.
It is. It's crazy to be thinking that now we're into November, which means we're going to be rolling into Christmas very soon, and getting ready for the holidays and whatnot.
All the fun, terrifying, wallet emptying fun that is coming our way, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's already started.
Yeah.
It really has.
All those Black Friday deals have already started.
I mean, the Christmas trees are in the stores already, the Christmas lights,
Yeah, it's insane. So we'll start off this episode kind of like we did with the last one. Some news around the gaming community. One of the ones that I wanted to touch on is Ghost Recon Breakpoint is getting a whole new single player campaign. I think that I only have played a little bit of Ghost Recon Breakpoint. I don't know that I'll pick it up again, maybe down the road when I get through some other games, but I think it's kind of cool that they're, bringing in a whole new single player for that game. Shows that they kind of still have like interest in that game. They're not just going to push it to the wayside and start working on a new project.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they really botched that game when it came out a few years ago. Like, it was bad. I mean, it's good to see that they haven't abandoned it and they're throwing some extra content its way for anybody who's stuck around or who might pick it up. But
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least that shows that it still has somewhat must of a decent, player base.
I mean, it's got to have something, otherwise they wouldn't be throwing content at it.
Or they've got like one dedicated person playing it, and they're just listening to that one guy.
Hey, they're dumping in hundreds of thousands of dollars into cosmetics and.
I mean, that's how live service games work. Gotta find those whales.
Hashtag GTA Online.
Absolutely. Josh, didn't you have something about Splinter Cell?
I don't know much about what I saw. It was just brief, but I know for the longest time people have been begging for, another Splinter Cell. And I saw that is actually a possibility.
There's currently rumors circulating that there is a new mainline proper Splinter Cell game that is like starting production in the near future, or maybe already has.
Okay.
Because the last Splinter Cell we got was Blacklist in 2013, so it's been 8 years, and then they keep putting Sam Fisher in everything else. Like, he's in Brawlhalla now. He's had that cameo mission thing in Wildlands. Yeah, in both the Ghost Recon games. He's a pseudo-playable character in Rainbow Six. And they made some crappy VR spin-off thing, and people have just been, I mean, I say people, but me, I've just been irritated and pissed off that they won't bring Sam Fisher back.
It's like the teasing. It's just the tease. It's like, come on, seriously.
Well, I mean, honestly, I read some of the stuff around it. Like, some of it was like, oh, they're fighting for resources. And I'm like, what resources? Like, Ubisoft has like 20 studios around the globe. Sure, like 12 of them at any time are working on frickin' Assassin's Creed because it's all they make anymore. But like they have the resources. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Like, I just think it's horse crap that they've been shelving this franchise for this long. I don't know.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, I'm optimistic because I want a new Splinter Cell and I want this to happen. But I'm also afraid because Ubisoft has basically made the same game for like the last 8 years now, and they just rebrand it differently. It
Well,
just looks slightly different.
they like they're really prone to reusing and rewashing their mechanics and just carrying them over into other titles that
Every
they're creating.
every game they make except for Rainbow Six Siege right now is basically the same. Every
Yeah.
Ubisoft game is a Ubisoft game. It is an open world sandbox with a bunch of dumb crap to do where you have to climb a tower to see this part of the map and, walk around and just like useless customization crap. Like it's the same game functionally. It's just
It
from different perspectives.
it really is. I mean, I'm not gonna argue with you.
I mean, don't get me
100%.
wrong. If you like that stuff, that's great. I'm just burned out on it, and I really hope that they stick to what Splinter Cell is supposed to be and not turning it into some
Yeah.
Ubisoft game.
I mean, like you said, they have so many studios that can work on different mechanics and keep things different for each studio that creates certain games instead of kind of like rewashing the same.
I mean, that's Ubisoft also has this weird. I mean, we could go into a whole tirade about Ubisoft, and
Right.
maybe we will at some point. But I mean, Ubisoft, especially for Assassin's Creed, like they have separate studios working on separate things for every Assassin's Creed game, which is why the credits for every Assassin's Creed game take like an hour and a half because they have to go through like everybody at like 12 different studios.
Mhm.
But like there's still like singular studios that occasionally do like build a game from the ground up. Like when they did South Park and the Fractured But Whole, like that was all one studio. That was not like, 8 different studios around the world
Yeah.
pooling stuff together. Anyway,
Cool. Now that Brandon's off his soapbox.
sorry.
No, it's all good.
I get angry. Okay, I get heated about it.
I know. You get passionate. Not angry, passionate.
Hey,
I do.
hey, that's the content we want. That's what we want our listeners to understand.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Also, since we talked about Destiny last time,
Hmm.
apparently, they are the new year, the new season, year-long season that they're gonna do the Return of the Witch Queen or something like that, Witch Queen expansion.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Apparently, they are going to be nickel and diming their customers.
Imagine that.
Because
Oh,
typically, when you buy the season, like you buy it and it's good for the whole year, and it splits all 4 of the seasons. So you get each of the 4 season passes for the year, and you get all the content for that year.
Yeah.
yeah.
For I think it's usually $50 or something like that. Which is a solid deal. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad.
Hmm.
Apparently this year though, in order to get the new raid content, like the new dungeons and stuff,
Hmm.
you need to pay for the deluxe or the premium editions. Otherwise, you can't get them.
WTF? Really?
And
Yep.
so
They
what's
and apparently later on they're saying that they're gonna be able to price them out to get them separately or something,
okay?
so that you might not need them. But as of off the rip, you need to buy the deluxe Witch Queen expansion or the premium one in order to get the year-long season content and get the dungeon raids and stuff, which is absolutely retarded.
There's no way they're hurting for some money.
No,
Yeah,
they're just making a cash cow. Is all it is. People are going to pay it,
Yeah.
and people are going to buy it. So that's what they're doing. Do they have a set price point for the other top tier season passes
I'm
yet?
sure it's. I think the base one is $50, and then I think the digital and the or the deluxe and the premium are like 70, and then like $100 probably. I had to guess.
Yeah, because I know even with kind of you mentioning like that, how they're nickel and diming people. They're even doing that with the Return of the Gallowhorn. Like that comes out, I think, November, no, December's, I believe. I'm not sure what day, but it's like $20, and that gets you the mission or whatever the raid mission it is to reobtain it, which is it's that's a little shady. I mean, you think with all the content, that would just be something that would come into the video game and you could work hard for instead of having to buy it, essentially.
It's greed. People just want money. It's kind of sad that all the extra stuff you have to buy, all the in-game content or the season passes that you have to buy, just so
I
that way
mean,
these softwares can make money.
I mean, part of it is now Bungie is free to play, so like I get that.
Yeah.
Like or
That's
not
true.
Bungie, Destiny. Since it's gone free to play, like it's kind of what you have to do to a point.
Right.
But at the same time, like there's a good way to do it, and then there's kind of a dirty way to do it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and this is pretty dirty.
Well,
Yeah, it's
they're not the only company that does season passes that you have to buy. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Call
Well,
of Duty
the other
does
thing too
it.
is the season pass has essentially become the answer to what used to be loot boxes, because loot boxes have become controversial because they're seen as gambling and yada yada yada.
yeah.
Right.
Um, which that's a whole other debate we can have. But so season passes, like you pay for it and you get that content, and it keeps you playing the game because, like,
Right.
it is a reasonable alternative, and I'm not wholly against it. That being said, is it being overdone to death?
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
Is it put like is it being thought out in a you know a good way? An affordable. I mean, but that's you can't have everything.
No. It's we seriously could probably spend 2 hours talking about season passes and our views and opinions on them, and
Money's worth and
yeah,
what's
it's that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could get into one day.
true.
And we might have to
absolutely.
readdress that, really go over games that have season passes and what the content that you get out of these season passes. That might be a pretty fun episode that we could do down the road.
We
Yeah,
could definitely do it.
absolutely.
Um,
But
so,
anyway,
any more news around? Any big news that we should touch on? Oh, one thing I want to touch on real quick is it looks like the Grand Theft Auto trilogy remaster that they're coming out with looks like November 11th. At least that's what I'm seeing on Game Pass when you can
yeah,
download
it's
San
something like that. Yeah,
Andreas.
Yeah,
yeah.
So we're getting it a
They
lot
were.
quicker than I thought. I thought it was going to be like first quarter 2022, to be honest with you.
yeah,
Yeah, they really. I mean, it's Rockstars. They were probably working on it behind the scenes for a while before they announced it.
Yeah.
yeah.
But
And
it
I
is
know that.
cool. It is cool that they like announced it and then they're basically ready to go with it, as
Yeah.
opposed to like announcing it and then taking them off the market and then us waiting like 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is nice that they, you know, essentially just shotgunned it pretty quick. And I mean, no, I'm sure we're wrapping up here, but I
Yeah.
know I'm not sure if we touched base on this, but another source of news is the next gen versions of Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk
Oh,
got
yeah.
pushed back until next year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
early
heard
next year.
about that. That kind
Yeah,
of sucks. I just got my Series X. Those are two games that are on my list that I want to beat so we can talk about. Uh, oh, well. I guess I'll either play it with the Xbox One X enhancements or push them off and wait till we get the updates for them.
yeah. I'm thinking I might do because there's so many games in my back catalog that I got to work on. So I guess it works out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we got nothing else, we will roll right into today's episode, which we talked about last episode, is the remaster of games that each of us have played throughout the years that we would love to be remastered in today's world or in today's time.
Society.
Yep. And uh, Brendan's going to give us kind of a little breakdown of our views, our ideas of what qualifies as a remaster, just so that way we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So specifically, this is about remasters, not remakes or reimaginings or recreations. Like, so basically, remaster is taking the original game as is and making it playable on modern consoles. Maybe hopefully giving it some graphical touch-ups to smooth everything out, frame rate, shave off some of the polygons if it's old enough, stuff like that, and maybe just a tidbit more of content, maybe modernizing the controls game. But again, the game itself is still fundamentally the same. So example would be something like Devil May Cry HD collection is a perfect example. Like they really just smoothed stuff over, put it all together, and made you this nice one package of the Devil May Cry collection. Um, and not a remake like the recent Resident Evil 2 and 3, where those games were rebuilt from the ground up in new engines with new gameplay um, to fit more modern sensibilities. Like that is a remake. That is not what we're talking about.
Yep.
Brendan, your brain is a beautiful thing. I tell you what.
All right, and so to start off this episode, Josh, what's the game that you would like to see remastered?
Oh, we kind of touched on the Ubisoft side of things earlier in our news, but I think out of most of my gaming experience, like a lot of my addiction came from the first Assassin's Creed game, and I think that I know that is the first game I played over and over and over that just kind of like really got me into replaying games in general. But when it comes to like its mechanics and it's definitely dated now for sure because it came out in 2007 originally on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Uh, which I mean that's a long time ago. I mean, it feels like a long time ago now, but I mean, if a lot of people don't know, Assassin's Creed is a sandbox style RPG with stealth elements that kind of like push the envelope for a lot of RPG sandboxes during its time. But it also had a lot of issues when it came to its mechanics and things of that nature and was very, bang your head into a wall type stuff. But when it comes to a remaster for it, I mean, I'd love to see them refine the graphics, smooth it out, because that game has the potential, and back in the day, it was beautiful. To even be even more so now with the modern technology and what they're able to do with remastering games, and on that forefront, I mean, even I would love to see the additions of maybe some mechanical fixes with like I mean, everybody remembers climbing buildings and getting stuck, and you want in like the little grip you're supposed to be able to move to is right there, but you can't get to it because your guy's like glued to that same spot, and you end up wall ejecting and falling to your death. So when it comes to maybe some mechanical additions, smoothing things out, I'd love to see maybe some more fluidity in its control scheme, and even with it's so a lot of people could say like it's combat with its auto parrying killing system. uh Maybe even add a little bit of more, maybe an animation or two that are extra, or even so like maybe there's some cut content that they have that we don't know about that they could possibly add into the game to refine it and just make it seemingly work better, modernize the controls slightly, and just give the opportunity for a lot of people to experience the first Assassin's Creed game. Because I mean, for a lot of people, that's obviously where it started, and there's obviously a big market and a big following for Assassin's Creed games as a whole. And I'm surprised they haven't done a remaster for it to show people, hey, this is where it started. And I mean, because in the first game, you play as Altair Ibn Ahad. He is the first great assassin, at least as they like to tell it throughout the game's story. And you also play in modern time, if a lot of people don't know about Assassin's Creed games, it takes place in two different points in time. In our modern time, you play as Desmond Miles, and how they introduced the past, system back during the Crusades, which is where the Altair is currently living, and it's all brought together by what the game likes to call the Animus, which is a high tech piece of equipment that searches through or sifts through your DNA to find your ancestors' genes that are entwined with you. But for remaster's sake, I would absolutely love to see that game in all its glory with how they're able to remaster games. I mean, because obviously, all you viewers, you've played probably a few remaster games now, and you've seen what they could do. So I think that would be one of my top games I'd love to see remastered.
Yeah, it is actually kind of surprising that they haven't gone back because they literally remastered every other Assassin's Creed almost twice over at this point. Like,
Yeah.
it is kind of crazy that they haven't gone back to touch that one because I mean, at this point, it's probably considered a bit of the black sheep just because it came out and it sold well, but everyone agrees that it was rough and kind of hard to play. And I mean, like you were talking about, like the control scheme and some of the mechanics that, I mean, to a point didn't exist quite like that until Assassin's Creed. So like a lot of it was stuff they were developing for the first time and they didn't know, how to get that all to work and yada yada. So it'd be cool to go back and have all that smoothed over. Um, but I mean, it would be interesting to see too if they would try to shoehorn in some of the newer Assassin's Creed stuff because the newer Assassin's Creeds are very much more RPG oriented as opposed to the older ones, which are much more action adventure oriented. You get new
Yeah.
equipment and stuff, but you don't really get like there isn't like a skill tree. Like
Yeah. I mean, because like with probably the best in the series, Assassin's Creed 2. I mean, it wasn't its mechanics didn't stray far from the first game. So like you're saying is it's probably not far off or like a fairy tale or unrealistic that they could possibly bring over some of those mechanics that kind of helped out what they built mechanic wise in the first game.
that's what I like. I think. I mean, if anything, I think that would be the biggest part of that remaster is fixing those controls to make them work and play better in a modern setting. And then, I mean, obviously a visual upgrade. But I mean, there are parts of Assassin's Creed 1 that are beautiful. There are also parts that aren't because a lot of that game is just a wide open desert. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
really need to see crappy brown mountains in
yeah.
4K.
Yeah.
Yeah, those the what Brendan is referring to is that going from your home settlement, which is Masyaf, and traversing to the other settlements such as Jerusalem and
Jerusalem and
stuff,
Damascus.
and you go through a very very plain landscape that has
It
not a lot of detail.
honestly, that section really just does not need to be there. It is so unnecessary. it,
It really is.
it is. It was really just there to be like, hey, look, we have an extra area in this game with stuff, and they stuck like 80 of those stupid flags in there. Ugh.
Yes,
There we
that
go.
and just a lot of repetitive buildings, and just it was very strange, and it almost did seem like it was thrown together with little thought. I mean,
I
so
mean, it just doesn't serve much of a gameplay purpose.
it
It
doesn't.
was very much of a tech purpose to be like, hey, look, we can do like an outdoorsy type of place, which doesn't fit Assassin's Creed at all, and no one cared. But
Yeah, I wouldn't say like maybe. I mean, obviously, there's probably people out there that loved it, but it could be removed, and in doing so, I mean, they could really put more work into, obviously, the cities.
yeah, well, I
Which,
mean, maybe they could spruce that area up though,
yeah,
instead of just making it that brown plain landscape that it is.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
literally.
I played a little bit of Assassin's Creed, and if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I actually gave you my copy of Assassin's Creed, and that's what kind of started it and snowballed for you. I did think that back in 2007 it was when it came out that it was a very visually appealing game, even for back then. Which we say this every single year a game comes out. Oh, it's a beautiful game, and it's crazy to go back and look at games from 2007, 2005, 2004, and be like, man, that was a really good looking game. For back in that day.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could, uh, you know, thank you a million times for, giving me that game, which is, because I wasn't, exploring games really during that time, and you gave it to me, and I was like, heck yeah, I'll play it, try it out, whatever this
You
game is, and I remember playing it, and I remember like the key thing that blew me away was seeing him the ability to hold, I believe it was the X button, or to see his hidden blade come out, and you would hold it there,
Yeah,
and you
Yeah,
release the button, and it would go back in. My mind was like, "Whoa! Oh my, that's so cool!" You know?
yeah, uh,
yeah. I mean, sometimes games have those little details that can really just kind of stick with you.
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
So,
seriously, Tim, thank you
no,
for those
no problem.
experiences.
Or I'm sorry, whichever. We can go
Yeah,
either
you
way
should
with this one.
apologize. You've ruined him.
Oh man.
You still playing Assassin's Creed to this day. It's all your fault.
I am. It's one of my favorite game series. Guilty as charged.
Yep. So, Brendan, what's your game that you'd like to see remastered?
All right. Well, I'm gonna put on one, my old man hat, and two, I'm gonna put on my cult nerd hat.
I'm gonna
Cause
see Sips Coffee.
We're gonna need pictures of this, Brendan.
if I had coffee, I do have hats I could put on, but that's we'll have to save that for later.
All right.
Anyway, I have chosen the cult classic that is Beautiful Joe. It was released in 2003 originally. Developed by Capcom. Came out on the GameCube. Originally was later released on the PS2 with a few little new bits of content. Um, uh, it was made by one of my personal favorite uh, game directors, developers, a man named Hideki Kamiya. For those of you who don't know, he's responsible for the director of Resident Evil 2. He also came up with Devil May Cry. And then after Beautiful Joe, he went on to make Okami, Bayonetta, and now he's one of the heads over at the studio at Platinum Games.
Okay.
Tremendous action game guy. I really do love all of his work, and this is proof of that. But anyway, Beautiful Joe is a side-scrolling beat 'em up uh, that you play a guy named Joe, conveniently enough.
Didn't see that one
And what
coming.
he, yeah, I know, right? Real shocker. But so he's just this guy, and he like works in movie theater. He loves movies, and then one day he gets sucked into movie land. Basically, yeah, he gets sucked into the movies. Which, if this is starting to sound very familiar, it's because it is also very much the plot to Last Action Hero. Uh,
I thought
Great movie, by the way. Great movie. Um, and so while he's in this world, um, he meets his favorite superhero called Captain Blue, and he's trying to save his girlfriend, who also got sucked into the world. Um, so eventually, shortly on in the game, he gains superpowers. Um, but the fun part to these powers is, since you are in movie land, they mostly uh, play off of things you would do to a movie. So the first power you get is slow motion. So you start moving in slow mo, and then you can, you know, dodge easier. You actually hit harder, and then stuff like that. And then you also get Mach speed, which is fast forward. So then you just move really fast. Um, you can, combo easier. And you also get some other items and abilities. There's Boomerang, which he calls a Boomerang because he becomes Beautiful Joe and everything's themed around the V. Uh, get some bombs, some other kind of items, stuff like that. You know, another power called Zoom In, which just focuses it on you and freezes all the enemies outside of it, basically. And then you do extra damage to anything in that box when it zooms in on you. Um, but the game is, and I mean, I know we literally just talked about this with Assassin's Creed, but the game is gorgeous, but not because it went for like realistic graphics. It's not at all. It is done in a very heavy cell shaded comic book art style. So kind of like Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker
Okay.
or Persona, if anybody's played Persona.
Hmm.
So like it looks like somebody drew a comic book. Like all the characters have very thick black outlines, um, and it's also done again in a movie thing. So like at the top and the bottom of the screen, you'll see from old film, like actual film, like those. And they used to make reels. They used to have those little uh, slots on the side, like on
Yep.
each side of the film and on each frame. So like those are there
Okay.
a fair amount of the time.
That's interesting.
Um, yeah, and it's like I said, it's a side-scrolling beat 'em up, and it's probably I'm gonna say this because I couldn't think of any others, but it's probably the best game to ever do it. it's it's so good. It is so much fun, and I put God only knows how much time into that game, just playing through it over and over and over and over again. And I think it would fit into today's gaming, one because it's old school and, nostalgia pops these days, remastering everything.
Yeah.
Um, but also because of its difficulty. The game is not easy.
Yeah.
And I mean, with modern difficulty of games, like there's definitely, uh, because of games like Dark Souls and Sekiro and stuff, there is definitely a trend back upwards to because people are wanting some more difficult games.
Right.
So I think it could help fill that slot. Um, and I think it could really find a new audience because it's it it's a fun action adventure game that doesn't take itself too seriously,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time isn't a joke. Like it's like yeah, it's got some laughs and the main character's, a smart ass goof.
Yeah.
And it plays a lot on some of those, old movie tropes and some old side-scrolling beat 'em up tropes. Um, but it does that again without, you know, being a parody of that. Like it's still so rock solid and so incredibly fun to play. And honestly, you they basically don't need to do anything to it. They just need to like smooth out some of the graphics and upgrade it and make it playable on modern consoles. And it's good to go. Like it would take such minimal effort to
Yeah.
make that game go right now. I
Yeah.
like it honestly kind of boggles my mind that they haven't. I mean, I know some of the reasons why it hasn't, but
I mean,
it
like that I would love to experience that specifically because I've never played that game, and the video game industry is very rinse and repeat now, and obviously a lot of companies are endorsing indie companies more often now. I mean, I feel like that would be awesome, and we need more stuff like that to kind of come back.
I mean, and it's something that again, it came out in 2003 and uh like side-scrolling beat 'em ups were a dying breed back then, which is probably partially why the game was moderately successful. It didn't do great, but it did all right. It did end up getting a sequel in Beautiful Joe 2, and then it got like two other kind of spin-off games. Um, but that's being said, it got four total games released between 2003 and 2005,
Mm-hmm.
and it hasn't gotten a game since. And he did make Beautiful Joe is a playable character in 2008's Tatsunoko vs. Capcom for the Wii. Tremendous fighting game.
Yeah.
And then he is also a playable character in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, uh, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Fate 2 Worlds, whatever, all the various versions of that. He's a playable character in that, and that was 2011. Um, so like they recognize that there is a bit of cult following for him, but they just haven't pulled the trigger on remastering it or making a new game out of it. Um, I mean, again, I'm not asking for a new game. I will happily take Beautiful Joe 1. I mean, I'll also take 2 if they want to throw them into a combo package. That'd be tremendous. But at
Right.
least the first one.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Honestly,
Like,
I'd give it a shot.
and I mean, again, like it's the 2D side-scrolling beat 'em up was a dying breed at the time, and now is more or less gone. Um, it's a thing that isn't around as much anymore. There are a few games here and there that do it. I mean, they did just bring back Streets of Rage and Streets of Rage 4. That's a little similar. But just I don't know. I guess bring back some of that old school flavor, and again, being taking something that had been around for so long, and again, I think Beautiful Joe really honed in and sharpened that genre to arguably its finest edge. Like the game is, like I said before, probably one of, if not the best, 2D side-scrolling beat 'em ups ever.
I
I
I I, I feel like our genres are suffering. I would like to see that kind of stuff come back. Honestly,
so I never even heard of Beautiful Joe until we were kind of talking about this episode and what games we were each going to talk about. And then
Right.
hearing you talk about it, Brendan, I if they remastered it, I would absolutely give it a shot and try it out. I think
But
that it sounds like a fun game, to be honest.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, that's the thing is I think it could really find a new audience with that old school flavor, and especially even now, looks vastly different than the vast majority of games out there. Like it pops, like it stands out just visually. I mean, anybody listen to this right now, go Google it. Go Google a screenshot of it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like it looks like very much like a heavy drawn comic book come to life, and I'm like it's I don't know. It's just it was such a unique game at the time, and it's a shame that more people didn't get to play it. But I
Should have
think
been
it could
fun.
really find an audience now with the visuals that it has, that old school gameplay, um, the difficulty that it has, and uh, how. And again, like a lot of games. I mean, again, I'm gonna kind of harp on Ubisoft here a bit, but a lot of games try to, you know, do everything to try and net you in one area. Like, I mean, again, Assassin's Creed, is a big open world RPG action adventure, set in history game. And like it's cool, like it's fine. Like I'm not trying to trash that, but it's trying to
Yeah.
cast as wide a net as possible to get as many people to play it as possible.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, because, I mean, there are some, I mean, a lot of indie developers creating a lot of side scroller games, not specific to, Beautiful Joe, but when it comes to, some of these side scrollers that have come out, like, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, it's the uniqueness of the art that they have utilized for that side scroller specifically, and there's other ones too. I just don't know the names of them. That beautiful. I think Beautiful Joe would fit in nicely, and I think it'd be a banger, honestly. Especially the way you describe it, and like you said earlier, like people, our listeners, you guys, gals, go research it.
Absolutely.
And I mean, again, like it's a lot. The other thing too is a lot of modern side-scrolling games take inspiration from uh, older Metroids and Castlevania, which tremendous pedigree to take from. I have zero problems with Metroidvania style games, but this is not that. This is very much a level by level, you know, beat up everything on the screen and get good at it and move on to the next part.
Yeah.
Like, cause it does not. It is very heavy combat focused. There's some light puzzles here and there. Some really unique boss fights. Um, but the whole point is that you learn the skills of the game that you need to know within like the first probably hour, and that's it. Like that is it is taught you everything you're gonna need to know basically in this game, and then everything else is just on you to, you know, sharpen your skills and get better and better at the game. And I don't know. Again, I mean, I am passionate about it because I do love this game and I do miss it dearly. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would do damn near anything to get that game remastered.
That's fair.
Slam my hand on the table. Money, take it.
Yeah.
I would, dude. They could charge me $60 for the laziest remaster, and I would easily put it down. I don't know if everybody else would, but I totally would.
Well, they'd at least make
Absolutely.
$60.
Hey, if that's enough, then that's good enough for me.
I'll
Right.
take out a small loan if I have to. Okay, just take my money.
Yes. Yes.
All right, but anyway, I could keep harping on this, but I will stop.
That's fair.
Uh, Tim, what have you chosen?
So the game that I've chosen is True Crime Streets of LA. The game was initially released in 2013 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube, which later in the following year came out on PC.
You mean 2003?
Or did I say 2002?
You said 2013.
Oh, my bad.
I was
2003.
like,
I
that
didn't
doesn't
catch
sound
that. I
right.
didn't catch it. Dang.
I wish it had come out in 2013. It'd be more relevant to today. No, it came out in 2003. My
There we
apologies. You follow a suspended detective who's now being reinstated by the name of Nicholas Kang, who also joins the EOD for the police department that he works for Los Angeles Police Department, which is the Elite Operations Division. They bring him off of suspension early and onto this uh, division, if you will, because the triads, or a Chinese or Asian gang, is going throughout the city and blowing up different establishments. And so your character, Nicholas Kang, has to try and solve these events happening and try and bring it down, bring the syndicate down. The game is not super story based, and it's also been like referred to or compared to like Grand Theft Auto 3, because Grand Theft Auto 3 came out in 2001, I believe, and this came out in 2003. So the games are very similar in how they're played. The graphics, kind of looking at side by side pictures and whatnot, the graphics are actually very similar as well. Uh, it was Who made it? I don't remember who made it.
I mean, it was published by Activision, if I remember
Was it
off the top of my
Activision?
head.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact developer though. To
Game
also be fair,
developed
I don't think
by
they're in business anymore.
Luxoflux.
Yeah, they're not in business anymore.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Anyways,
Mm.
uh, so like I said, the game wasn't very. There was a story that you played, and but it wasn't like super in depth. But the thing that I liked about the game was kind of the mechanics. It was very arcadey in my opinion. Your
Oh,
character
definitely.
your character ran around dual wielding pistols, not even pistols, revolvers, to initially start, and the fighting in it was almost like a Tekken tag sort of fighting, like
Street
an
Fighter.
arena, like a Street Fighter or Tekken. It wasn't like just punch kick. It threw in different elements. You would have to upgrade your shooting ability, and once you upgrade like your shooting, you get like different perks, if you will, and you get different guns along with like the fighting scheme. You Instead of like having a link tree, what I'm trying to get at is, instead of having like a link tree and as you progress and you gain more XP, you just click, okay, I want him to know this, I want him to know that. You actually had to go to these establishments like the shooting range and go through a shooting course to improve your shooting skills. Along with the fighting, you had to go to the dojos and fight to learn these new abilities. I really liked that, of how they incorporated leveling your guy up, if you will, but they encompassed it inside the game instead of having a simple link tree and be like, okay, yep, I want that, I want that, I want that. The soundtrack for the game I thought was pretty good. I do like a good soundtrack in a game. The game is based in LA, Los Angeles, as I previously mentioned, and it was actually a fairly big map, especially for being back in 2003. Games were confined to the size of the CDs or the compact discs that they were on at the time. And so I think that with a remaster, bringing it up, cleaning up the graphics, I don't really know that there was any physics that really needed to be improved. I think just a simple bringing the graphics up to today, I would be like a little kid in a candy store or a little schoolgirl screaming my head off seeing Justin Bieber if I got this game remastered. This was hands down one of my favorite games. One of the other parts that I really loved about the game is the cheat code that you could put in, and you could play as Snoop Dogg. Who doesn't love a game where you
Yeah.
play as Snoop Dogg
Yep.
as a cop?
That's
I remember that one.
amazing.
Yeah.
I
That
mean, there
Go ahead, Josh.
there wasn't. I mean, what there wasn't a lot of cops and robbers games that kind of utilized what True Crime did that I can. I mean, that I saw back then. I mean, like obviously, I think like me and you, Tim, have talked about how much you love like the role play of GTA's modded servers of cops
Yep.
and robbers. I mean,
Yep.
I'm surprised true crime or that type of like build of a game hasn't come back.
I and I'm surprised too, and I can't even begin to make speculations on it, and I don't know that I really want to. I just I would love to see this game remastered. We could get into a remake about it in a later episode, or we could even talk about games that, in our opinions, require sequels or should have sequels. Again, that's
Mhm.
another episode that we could get into down the road. I really loved this game and what it brought. and it wasn't so much confined. It was an open world like Assassin's Creed, or like I said, you compare it to Grand Theft Auto 3, which had come out 2 years prior. So you get to drive around the city, and then with being able to drive around the city, again, you're a cop. So now you see people walking down the street, you can actually go search them, and if they have illegal guns or drugs on them, you arrest them and you take them to jail. To me, that was a cool little detail that they added into the game to give you the feel of a cop while still playing, the story. You play the story and be like, oh yeah, cool, I'm a cop. Well, now you get to run around and do what is called proactive police work, getting these bad guys off the street. When you're driving around, or just anytime you're inside the game, different in-game events would trigger that would be like crime. There'd be a brawl down the street, there would be a robbery going on, and you don't have to. It's just a little like side quest, if you will, a little quick side event, and you go and you can arrest those people, search them. You can break up the fights. I loved the little details that they brought into that game. If I remember correctly, True Crime Streets in New York came out afterwards, obviously, and I think they kept a lot of those same elements. And then a few years down, they tried to bring the game out again for a third game in the series. It eventually got scrapped. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you know the details more than I do, Brendan. It like got scrapped, but then another studio picked it up, and they had to rename it to Watch Dogs.
No, Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping Dogs. That's what it was. Sleeping Dogs. And well, yes, it was still a true crime game. It didn't have the elements that I liked from True Crime Streets of LA, so I didn't latch onto it like I did. But I would absolutely love to see True Crime Streets of LA get a remaster. Like I said, I don't think there's a lot that they'd have to fix. I think that they just clean up the graphics, and even if I'm the only person that paid $60 for it, fuck it, I'd buy it.
Well, I
Yeah.
think to clarify, yeah,
Yeah.
so Sleeping Dogs was originally supposed to it was literally supposed to be True Crime Hong Kong. It was
Yep.
literally its original title. Like that was the whole plan. Um, and this got started development in 2007 or 8. Um, after Luxoflux went under because Streets of New York did not do well at all. It
No.
bombed.
Yeah.
Um, so Activision shuttered them and handed it over to United Front Games and asked them to make a new True Crime. And so they took a lot of the mechanics. I mean, not all of them, but they took a fair amount of them, did all that, and then Activision, I think it was 2009 or 10, they saw the project, decided they didn't want it, and canceled it basically. So United Front had to repurpose a few things, and then Square Enix picked it up, and that's what became Sleeping Dogs.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I wasn't too
and
familiar
that
on the
came out
history of that.
in 2012, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, because that wasn't much of a spiritual successor, was it?
I mean, again, it was originally supposed to be a true crime game. They literally took the same game that they built and they just changed the name. And I think they changed a few of the smaller things around so that they wouldn't get sued basically. But I mean, it's inherently the same game.
Yeah.
Um, but I
So
mean, yeah, it definitely does not have some of those aspects of the original True Crime Streets of LA.
right.
Um,
So
so I mean, yeah, I can see why you wouldn't entirely latch
yeah.
on to Sleeping Dogs.
Yep. I would just love to see True Crime Streets of LA come back. That would be like my
I mean, I agree.
one of two
Like
games that
it's
Again, another game, series or that's kind of lacking in our portfolio of games nowadays.
well,
Yep.
I mean, there is enough franchises out there, but it is
Mhm.
true that it's a bit of a forgotten gem, the
Mhm.
original. I,
Yep.
Gangs of New York is trash. Like I'm sorry, Tim, but Gangs of
I,
New York was terrible.
I know I played it. I don't remember playing a lot of it. I know I really latched onto LA. I don't
I
remember
mean,
a lot about New York.
New York, I mean, it was very much more or less the same game, but in New York. And then, but they rushed it out because
Mhm.
Streets of LA actually did fairly well. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like it broke the doors off, didn't become like some super crazy runoff hit or anything, but
Yep.
he did reasonably well. I mean, hence why it got a sequel. but they
Right.
kind of rushed the sequel, and so it was a buggy, broken mess. And this is
Yeah.
before you could patch a game, so like it came out broken and was stuck this way because they couldn't fix it.
There's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah, so it was buggy, it was broken, like half the stuff didn't work half the time,
Yep.
and then the story was more or less the same. And they basically just took the same game, rushed it out, and then put it in New York, and it was just didn't work.
Right.
But I mean, I agree. I would definitely not mind having Streets of LA come back. And I guess actually now that I think about it, I mean, not exactly the same, but 'cause
Hmm.
Streets of LA has a bit of a goofier tone, or definitely a less serious
Yes,
tone.
I meant to bring that up. So the like this, I don't want to like the little ad libs or the things that different characters say are just kind of like outlandish, which brought like kind of like a comedy or a goofy tone to the game too. In a game that
Like Starsky and Hutch.
yeah, yeah, kind of like Starsky and Hutch, if you will. Just I don't remember what some of the audio clips were, but they were just like random and funny. They weren't like serious and dark toned. It was
Yeah.
kind of like a lively to the game.
And I mean, you mentioned it before too, that
Yeah.
it got comparisons to GTA,
Yep.
which I mean, we mentioned before how many games could draw their stuff back to GTA in the early days, but
Yeah.
back then, I mean, yeah, there was an explosion after GTA 3 of, hey, we should make our own GTA, and this was definitely in that vein. But
Yep.
just because it's a clone or a copy or similar to a game doesn't mean that it's bad.
No.
Like, I mean, look at all the good stuff that came out of Doom and all the games that got called Doom clones for like 8 years after Doom came out.
Right. No.
Like, there's still
Absolutely.
so many good things that came out of that. Like, it's not a derogatory thing to say that it was, a GTA clone or very similar to GTA.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. This is actually gonna be a two-part. So the next one will be released here in a couple days. Um, so definitely keep an eye out for that. We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll kind of say it now. Hope you enjoy the next episode as well. 5 stars, thumbs up, subscribe, like. You can catch us on Twitter at CO Gaming Podcast. Our link tree's in the description. We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you guys for listening in. This is Josh.
Thanks for listening, Brendan.